some fun. But I just can't help thinking that if you...
Matching Mole were a band that existed briefly as part of the Canterbury scene. They were pretty much the brainchild of a guy called Robert Wyatt. There will be albums later in this series that are Robert Wyatt solo albums. He was quite heavily involved previously with a band called Soft Machine, and again there'll be some Soft Machine albums coming up. In fact, the name of the band Matching Mole is a pun via French, because French for Soft Machine is Machine Mole, and then he's transformed that into the English Matching Mole. So there we are. The other members of the band were also mostly part of the revolving door policy that was the Canterbury scene. And they existed for 2 albums, and they ceased to exist when Robert Wyatt switched direction, having had a really bad accident in which he lost the use of his legs. So he stopped being predominantly a drummer at that point. Hi, my name's Dan. The nature of this list and the way that I'm reviewing it is that for most of the albums, I'm not a specialist in the particular genre. And I think that this is entirely reasonable, I hope, because the reviews are mostly aimed at a general audience rather than a specialist audience. So, for example, when I'm reviewing jazz albums, I'm reviewing them as somebody who's not a jazz expert or a particularly huge jazz fan, so I don't know loads about jazz, but I'm reviewing the album for other people who don't know loads about jazz, so for a general audience. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because if I do have a specialist subject, it's progressive rock, and so I have to be careful with reviews of prog rock albums that I don't just kind of click into a specialist mode. I have reviewed this album before. It's a progressive rock album, and when I reviewed it before, it was particularly for a prog rock audience. So this is a slightly different review to that one. So it's an album of progressive rock, as I've just said. It's got a couple of fairly straightforward songs, but straightforward is a comparative term. So it starts with a fairly sentimental but somewhat tongue-in-cheek love song. It appears to be quite clumsy lyrically, but that's deliberate because it's a sense of humour going on there. This is followed by a more experimental track, which involves presumably Robert repeatedly saying and an echo machine on the vocals. And then there's another song with lyrics that are I'm not going to explain what the lyrics are, because only to say that they're indisputable. You really cannot argue with the lyrics. And again, there's a bit of a sense of humour going on here, but as the track unfolds, you kind of see the point behind what it's trying to say. The rest of the tracks are a variety between jazz rock and experimental avant-garde stuff. It's fair to say that the Mellotron gets almost as much playing with as the Echo Machine, which is quite a lot. The more experimental bits are reminiscent of early Pink Floyd, if you know what that means. There's quite a few shades of gong in here, although I'm not sure many people will know what that means. It's kind of odd but silly as well. And it feels like other Canterbury scene stuff as well that's around at the time. There's a lightness to it, and there's definitely quite a lot of experimentation going on. It's the kind of experimentation that I like, and I sometimes wonder what is the difference between experimentation I like and experimentation I don't like, because I don't just like things because they're weird, but I like some kinds of weird. I haven't necessarily put my finger on exactly why. Okay. There's a track on this album that has got some kind of background history to it. It's called Dedicated to Hugh, But You Weren't Listening. So this is a reference to a track by Soft Machine that Robert Wyatt used to be part of, which was called Dedicated to You, But You Weren't Listening. And it's a track that has been picked up by several other people. It's an avant-garde, really avant-garde jazz track that other people have done versions of. But it was written by a guy called Hugh Hopper. So this is a reference to Hugh Hopper, who wrote it, and a kind of homage to him through the name as well. So overall, I like this album. I like it quite a lot. I would say it may be a bit inaccessible for people who don't like odd music of this particular kind. If you're wanting to give some of the odder end of prog rock a try, then this might be a good album to listen to. Do you know this album? Are you new to it? I'd love to know your thoughts, your reactions. Let me know in the comments down below. That's it from me for now.